Hello. Today we're going to explore freedom from multiple perspectives with an overlay of geometry. Geometry, the science of the sphere and its refraction into multiple distinctions. So, one of the evolutionary paths of freedom is the spiral through possibility. Now, if you look at the possibility field scientifically, by definition, anything that you can imagine is possible. That's the definition of possible, meaning that it could happen. It could be, it could exist under certain circumstances at certain times, etc. It is possible. And as a subset of the possibility field, anything is possible, meaning possibility exists beyond what your or my imagination might conjure. But anything that exists in your or mine or anyone else's imagination is possible. And so when you imagine the evolutionary trajectory of God, of goddess, of that word which is a symbol for the ultimate mathematical expression of reality, well, evolution dictates that God, that goddess, that God, goddess, all that is the highest fulfillment, the highest attainment, the highest expression of the possibility field. Now, on the journey to becoming all that is, on the journey to becoming the God face, the goddess face of all that is, there is a hierarchy of relationship with everything. So we might begin the journey towards goddesshood, towards godhood, with antipathy. We might begin with unconsciousness. We might begin with antipathy, with fear and hate of everything. But over time, as that evolution matures in the hierarchy of state, that fear leading to hate becomes fear leading to understanding, comes understanding leading to power, comes power leading to freedom, comes freedom leading to joy, comes joy leading to awareness, comes awareness leading to acceptance, comes acceptance leading to love. And we have the exact same possibility field now related to, with grace, with love, with a high state of grace, of elegance, the efficiency of transforming energy into a high state. And the underlying drive of all consciousness is to feel sustainably better. And the underlying drive of each one of us is to avoid feeling chronically worse. And so we may start off the relationship with all that is in the smallest possible state of fear, of shock, of mystery, of terror, of pain, and of loneliness, of separation. But the nature of reality is to bring us slowly, inexorably into connection with all that is, in such a way that breaks through the illusion of isolation, the illusion of separation, leads to more and more perception more and more caring, more and more understanding, more and more grace, and more love, such that ultimately the state of divinity is to be conscious of the entire possibility field from a state of grace, from a state of compassion, of love, of joy, of acceptance, a high state. This is the most stable mathematical position known to consciousness. Because when you are conscious of everything in a relationship of acceptance, of unity, of awareness, and of love, there is no enemy. There is nothing to defeat. There is nothing to stop. There is acceptance of all of it. There is an unshakable mathematical position. And there are several different journeys within the field of geometry that we go on in our journey from rejecting everything in fear and in hate to embracing everything in love and in grace. The first, well, it's not really the first, but one of the geometric journeys we take is the journey of extremism, the journey of the extreme. Now, time-space has a curvature to it. And what this means is that when you head around the planet in a straight beeline for east, if you travel long enough, you will eventually travel all the way around the planet and come back to the place that you began from a different angle. If you continue down any straight line, you end up at its opposite and then back where you were before. And you can look at this, for example, with the extreme of selfishness. So selfishness in our cult has a bad rap. It's got a bad reputation. So I want everything good for me. That's what selfishness is. Selfishness is not I want everything bad for me. I want everything good for me. Okay? So what's good for me? Well, I want lots of money. I want this and this and this and this. Okay. So what are you going to do with that money? Well, I want to buy things. From whom? From other people. So how are they going to get the things and create all the wonderful things that you want to buy? Well, see, they've got to have resources as well. So in order for me to have an unimaginable amount of buying power, I've got to have a large economy doing well to buy from. And I've got to have people that want to sell to me, which means people that know what selling is. I have to have intelligent people. And I think you get where I'm going with this. In order to be 100% perfectly selfish, everyone on the planet needs to be healthy. Why would you enjoy looking out of your limo and seeing unhealthy people when it's more fun to look out of your window and see healthy people? Why would you enjoy getting diseases from someone when it's more fun to be healthy? So given the interconnected fabric of reality, if I want a world of abundance for me, I need to participate and invite a world of abundance for as many people as possible. It's more fun to be around happy people than it is to be around sad people. So I need the world to be happy because it's more fun to be able to travel anywhere in the world rather than be stuck in my gated community. It's not as fun to be stuck in my gated community as it is to travel the entire world. And when we do connect with other planets in the multiverse that have civilizations more developed than our own, we need to have an incredibly happy, thriving, successful universe so that anywhere we can possibly imagine going and stuff, that it's there and we can go there and it's fun because those people are having a good time as well. So, in other words, to be truly selfish, we have to be 100% selfless. Because if you start from that extreme, you end up at the same place. If you're truly selfless, then you should dress good for other people because they have to look at you. You should smell good for other people because they have to smell you. You should be competent because they've got to deal with you. You should be rich so that you can give them money. You should be happy and growing so that they can get that vibe off you. You should be sustainable and treat your body well so that they won't have to get a replacement. And suddenly, in the act of being 100% selfless, you've had to create a pretty neat life for you because that's better for other people. So, this is one of the journeys from where one extreme leads to the other extreme. It's the journey of extremes. And usually the journey of extremes begin with ignorance, as many journeys do. I'm going to set off away from where I am on the right path, and I'm going to arrive back at it through a series of unforeseen events and know it for the first time and understand it for the first time as the cycle of opposites completes. Now, next we have the cycle of pain and attachment. So one of the things that occurs as a common part of the birthing and maturation process of human beings is shock, trauma, dysregulated energy, the law of mass, which dictates that the larger force will always impact the smaller force more than the smaller force will impact the larger force. As the perfection of complexity, of unconscious grace, emerges into the cult framework, the infant, the child, is subjected to shock, to trauma, to poorly organized energy that crosses boundaries, that violates principles and ideas, that is muddled, confused, and hypocritical. And in the process of that, induces fear, pain, helplessness, powerlessness, grief, terror, and the backlash of those energies. I never want to feel these things again. And with that, the attachment of control, the attachment to avoiding pain and hanging on to what makes me feel bigger, more powerful, more in control, more happy, more balanced. I don't want to feel this way. I want to feel this way. And in this, so the more pain and disorganized energy that comes towards the child and the infant, the more there is a clinging to the known. Because in the antithesis of that movement, the movement away from that pain, contained within the absolute statement, I never want to feel this way again. Every child, every adolescent in a disorganized and unsophisticated culture is going to go through the involuntary traumatization of a young culture, followed by the conscious reaction, the antithesis of that process, which is, I never want to feel this way again. And contained within that statement, I never want to be out of control again. And contained within that statement, I never want to leave known terrain again. And within that statement, the strong attachment to the familiar and to the known, the wound out of which every cult, every culture emerges. I want this, and I want everyone to be like this, and I want to be like this, and I don't want to change. I don't want to face my fear of the unknown, which has within its vastness the fear of feeling completely small, completely terrified, completely helpless again. Now, within the known conscious domain, all pain is in the conscious mind. All pain is the perception of an isolated ego looking through a series of lenses that create the illusion of separation, the illusion of asymmetry, the illusion of pain, and with it, the fear of pain. So you have this cycle of pain and clinging to pain, and the known and clinging to the known. And then you have the process. You have a friction process where all that clinging and tightening creates more and more friction. And with that friction, more and more awareness. And with that awareness, more and more perception. And with that perception, more and more mastery. And with that mastery and that perception, more and more grace, more and more safety, more and more ease. And with that ease, more and more trust. And with that trust and with that ease, a letting go. And the journey of attachment is complete. Now, another journey is a journey of paradigm. One paradigm is the paradigm of truth and lies. So you have the possibility field, all that is. And truly so in the search for truth. If you look at total and complete truth, it is all that is from all angles, at all times, in all places. Meaning, truth is a continuum. If I say, this is a finger, that's true. But it's not as true if I say, this is a finger, this is a finger, this is a finger, and this is a finger. And it's not as true if I say, these are all fingers, and this is a thumb. And it's not as true as if I say, these are fingers, this is a thumb, and this is a hand. And it's not as true as if I say, and the hand smells like this, and the hand tastes like this, and it has these colors. In other words, the more awareness, the more truth. The totality of all that is on all dimensions, in all time, in all space is more true than a limited object in a limited time, in a limited space from one or two dimensions. So the journey towards truth is the journey towards awareness, is the journey of expansion, is the journey of consciousness in the relationship with everything. Everything in all places, in all times, on all dimensions, which just within language, that's everything seen through this paradigm, through this paradigm, through this paradigm, through this paradigm. Everything seen through this value hierarchy and this value hierarchy and this value hierarchy and this value hierarchy. Everyone seen from this perspective and this perspective and this perspective and this perspective. When you look at the planet, and someone in Australia says it's nighttime, and someone at the same time in San Francisco says, no, it's daytime. No, it's nighttime. No, it's daytime. You see, when you have the entire planet in all of its shades of light, dusk, and dawn happening simultaneously, you have a more complete picture. So you have a more nuanced relationship. You have a more complex relationship in your relationship with the planet. It's not either or, it's both and. It is nighttime in Australia, it's dawn in Tokyo, it's dusk in this other place, and it's daytime here. It's 22 degrees below zero in Antarctica, it's 0 over here, it's 150 degrees over here, it's this degrees here, and over in the sun, it's 10 million degrees. So when we understand that every distinction reveals part of the possibility field for time, the possibility field for taste, the possibility field for warmth, the possibility field for light and color, and the possibility field for nameless dimensions that we lack the observing and measuring devices to observe and measure. Because on the dimension of Zinth, there is something happening that we don't have language for. Because no one has an observing and measuring device for the dimension of Zinth. And so we don't see it. Just like when there's something happening above and below the conscious light spectrum of the human eye, we don't know that it's happening either, because we don't have an observing and measuring devices for anything but a very small window into a very small part of all that is. And when some object shows up that we can measure through the eye, through the nose, through these things, we say, oh, that's real, because I see it. But it's very much like a word. It's very much like a word. If you look carefully at consciousness, it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist without words. Think a thought, be aware of anything, and be aware that you are aware of it without a word. You trying? Is there anything you can be aware of without the word through which you become aware of it? Now, how this operates, if you look at the multidimensional spectrum of energy, is words are filters. They're lenses of perception. So if I take, for example, the entirety of all that is, it's unconscious. But if I add on to the entirety of all this is if I create the word light. Light is an idea, and it is an idea that is a window into a certain part of all that is, that comes into focus through that window. Now suddenly all of the color of everything that my eyes have seen in the past, can imagine in the future, or can see in the present, can come through this doorway called light. It's an idea through which energy interacts with and interferes with. So everything that has a possible color is now interacting with this idea, with this doorway, this window. And it's coming through that window, and it's creating an awareness of modulated, measured energy called light. Without the word, it doesn't exist. With the word, it exists. And there are many, many words that don't exist that could reveal parts of reality that would exist if they had a filter. It's like the soup of energy interacting with a certain word and coming into being, much like a light bulb, where you have electricity flowing through in pitch black. The electricity does not create light. But when it goes into a light bulb, the light or the electricity, the energy, is met with resistance. And as it's met with resistance, it starts to heat up and glow. And we call it light. Energy is just flowing through us all the time, and as it meets a word, an idea, it comes to light through the window of that word, and we call it truth. In fact, it is a very, very, very tiny part of truth. Now, each of us have observing and measuring devices to measure truth, which is to measure tiny bits of reality on that journey, which starts out as a finger and moves to multiple fingers and moves to a hand and moves to a body and moves to the idea of a species, and all ripples out from there. And that's just a tiny, tiny, tiny part of reality as seen through words in one dimension, the dimension of language, the dimension of distinctions in the body. So what people have is an operating system for perceiving and measuring reality so they can engage with it. Now let's look at the operating system of a five-pointed star. So we've got the totality of all that is, and we've got an operating system. And the five-pointed star has an operating system that's called 36 degrees. It's wonderful. The five-pointed star starts off here, and its operating system is go as far as it can go, and when it hits a wall, pivot 36 degrees, go as far as it can go. When it hits a wall, pivot, and turn right. So it starts off, dun, 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 hits a wall, pivots 36 degrees, turns right, heads over here, hits a wall, pivots right, 36 degrees, heads over here, pivots right, hits a wall, 36 degrees. And the thing with every operating system that has integrity, you have a very simple operating system of I'm going to fly east. That's it. That's the true way to go. The will of God, Allah, whatever, the extreme direction, I'm going to head this way. And nothing's going to deviate me from my path. It's a very simple journey. It just goes round and around the earth. As it interacts with the curvature of time and space, every single extreme becomes its opposite. Every righteous, it's one of the reasons that people get so uncomfortable about utopian visions, because they often lead to dystopian hells. It's why fanatical idealists are met with so many groans and moans, because invariably it goes from pointing up and up and up and up to the light to facing the darkest faces of the human psyche. All extreme directions lead to their opposite, and vice versa. If you set out trying to do as much, whatever it is you think is bad, as you possibly can, you generally start doing good. If you try to be selfish, you become selfless. If you try to be selfless, you become selfish. I mean, these opposites lead into one another. Now, the 5-pointed star takes you through a symmetrical journey through part of the truth. Why part of the truth? Well, it doesn't touch every point on the circle. It touches 5 points of the circle. It doesn't contain all the space between. It misses a lot. It's only on one dimension, in this case, geometric dimension. But nonetheless, it will take you, if you are true to your operating system, it will lead you back where you became. Any system, fly straight, turn 90 degrees, 36 degrees. Any system will ultimately take you back to the beginning. Knowing it with more clarity, because as you arrive back at your starting point from this angle, that you left from this angle, you've seen more along the way. So as you come back, you have a new perspective. You're looking at this position from this angle coming here, rather than looking back at it from this angle coming here. This is the heart of all journeys, to arrive where you began and know it for the first time. Now, one of the important maturation cycles is that of sympathy, antipathy, and synthesis. So every child comes into the world with yes. Every child is a yes to learning whatever language is in the family, within the culture, whatever. You give birth to a child in Japan, they will learn Japanese. They will be a yes to any number of sound, mouth symbols that the cult has prepared for it. Take that same infant, you give birth in Australia, they'll not only learn English, they'll learn it with an Australian accent. Every child is a yes to what is. Now, what is not perfect geometry, because every part of the whole is a fractal representation of the whole, which means that you are the circle and you are the one chopping it up into 5 bits. And when you take the multidimensionality of all of it and cut it down into 5 bits, you are the one being chopped up and in pain, which is why all systems of thought, all systems of culture are imperfect, are uncomfortable. And there is a resistance that is met as the unconditional yes of the child becomes the incredibly conditional no of the adolescent that rejects all of it. I hate my parents. I hate my cult. I hate the stupid way that this is done and the terrible way that this is done. I don't want any of it. I'm a yes to all of it. I'm a no to all of it. Yes, no, and then synthesis. The adult is the one that, having gone through the yes to it all, having gone through the no to it all, comes back to holding both positions and understanding I've watched myself in yes to this, I've watched myself in no to this. Now I get to decide. I'll have a little bit of that, but not this bit here. I love French toast, but I don't like being forced to feed it when I'm already full. So I'm a yes to French toast, yes to maple syrup, but only 1.5 pieces today, thank you. I'm no longer being force-fed by misguided parents. So we've got sympathy, antipathy, and synthesis. A triangular navigation through the circle of life. We also have the breath cycle, which is also the death cycle. So you have the pulling in of breath, you have the pause, the letting go of breath. We have the bringing in of liquid, the digestion of liquid, the release of liquid. You have the bringing in of food, the digestion of food, the release of food. You have the bringing in of life. You have the life cycle. Birth, blossoming, becoming, waning, dying, death. Birth, blossoming, becoming, waning, dying, death. You have the death and the life journey through the circle. You also have the cycle of existence and non-existence. In the mathematical creation of all that is, you have an equation. In the Big Bang Theory, everything's 1 minute is nothing, and then poof, there it is. And from that moment of existing on, it starts to equate, and this adds up, and plus this, and this, and this. As physicists will say, no energy is created or destroyed. It simply changes shape. It becomes more and more and more complex with time, etc. 1 plus 5 equals 6. Minus 2 equals 4. Minus 4 equals 0. And poof, it no longer exists again. So you have this interesting dynamic of a mathematical energetic equation that as long as it's not balanced exists. 200 million minus 314 billion multiplied by 15 trillion times this, blah, 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 blah. As long as you're in that equation, it all exists at a mathematical level. But as soon as you complete the equation with the ultimate equation that is nothing, that is zero, that transcends the values of the equation, you're back to nothing again. So you go through the mathematical cycle where it starts off as nothing. And you watch so much of the interesting shenanigans in the financial circles. The whole derivative market. The derivatives market in financial circles can be 100 times bigger than the underlying market upon which they're based. In other words, as you invent synthetic instruments, let's take real estate. This is one of the reasons why we had the economic volatility in 2008, 2009, much of the Western world. You take real estate, and let's say that, just for simplicity, that the real estate market is worth $1. Well, the derivative market then goes ahead and says, well, we're going to create a symbol for that value of the entire real estate market. And so this instrument is now worth $1. It's a bit like the fiat currency transition from gold to paper. If we say that this amount of gold is worth X dollar, now first gold is a symbol of value. Now we're going to create a symbol of gold, which is paper with bits of numbers on them. Well, now you can create symbols of those papers and bits of numbers. And then you can start leveraging. Now, as anyone knows with leveraging, you take you weigh 200 pounds, let's say, and you have a 6-foot crowbar, though. And for every foot you go out, you've now got twice as much pressure. So if this is how much effort I need to spend for my hands to lift a 200-pound weight. You put in a lever at 6 inches away, and if you go out a foot, it's the same, pretty much. But if you go out 2 feet now it takes half as much energy to get the same result. Now, if you leverage in financial things and you buy an instrument that is a symbol of a symbol of a symbol of a symbol, then $1 can control $10, $20. And this is how, and then you can borrow and multiply and synergize and collaborate in this synthetic environment in which the economy of symbols of value is bigger than the economy of the underlying assets. So that you can have a $20 real estate market on synthetics that is derived from a $1 real estate market. So it's how you can lose $20 off of $1 by turning it into these leveraged symbols, and then doing it with borrowed money. So human beings can create just about anything. But these types of things, where do these things come from? Out of nothing. It starts with an idea. I don't want to actually have to buy a house. I'd like to buy the idea of a house. Will you sell me the idea for a house? Well, how are you going to mathematically connect it to the underlying asset? Well, we'll just say that if housing prices go up, I have to pay you more money, and we'll just say if housing prices go down, I have to pay you less money. We'll peg it one to the other. It's like other fiat currencies around the world pegged to the US dollar. If the dollar goes up, we go up, regardless of what we're doing. So you have this mathematical dimension of all that is, that starts as nothing, becomes everything, and then disappears into nothing again. And you have a view. You have a view of reality, of good and of bad. And it ties back to this extreme nature where if you clearly define what is good and what is bad, and then you clearly define the behavior that is good and is bad, if you follow the bad behavior with all of its ripple effects, it will eventually have a good outcome. And if you follow the good behavior with all of its ripple effects, it will eventually have a bad outcome as you have defined it. So if you say molesting children is terrible, and this behavior is terrible, if you follow that behavior through its ripple effects with time, and look at what emerges in reality as a result of that behavior, you will then, if good and bad has been defined clearly, conclude that good things have happened because the bad thing happened. Meaning, it is inevitable in a statistical probability that, let's just take the statistics of childhood abuse, there will be some person who steps up to the plate to help those children that would not have stepped up to the plate to help those children if they hadn't been damaged. There are insights and growths and transcendences of pain and suffering that would not have happened if the pain and suffering had not occurred. Now, the key is to understand this prism of good and bad. Are you saying that it's good to be bad? No. Because that's still in the prism of good and bad. What I'm saying is that if you divide the whole into two equal parts, polarity, and within a possibility field, all polarities are equal by definition, because all possibility radiates out equally in all directions. It's like vision. If you have 20/20 vision, you don't have different poorer vision when you look behind you and only 20/20 vision in front of you. If your eyes see with what was considered 20/20 vision, you see with 20/20 vision here, you see here, you see here, you see here. If you are blind, you're blind here, you're blind here, you're blind here, you're blind here. The possibility field is neutral. It stretches out equally in all directions. However, if you divide reality into polarity, into duality, it is a scientifically neutral half. You're taking half of reality and saying it's good, and you're taking half that is bad. Otherwise, it gets to being dogmatic. Because if you're dealing with everything is divided into good and bad, and you're technical with that, you define good and bad truly, everything black is bad, everything white is good, or everything white is bad and everything black is good, whatever you do. Those are two true extremes. Everything kind or what? Every time someone says, yes, that's good, and every time someone says, no, that's bad. However you divide it in deeply technical terms, you will find that the one leads to its other, which is why one of the ancient cultures, the Chinese culture with the 4,000-year-old symbol of yin and yang, shows the one in the middle of the other. That little dot in the middle of the white symbol points to the fact that one cannot exist without the other. That the human body cannot exist. If you say right is good and left is bad, and then you cut the human body in half, it's meaningless because you have no functioning human body once it's been divided with a knife into left and right. So it's a very suspicious idea to say that the right side is good and the left side is bad if the right side cannot exist without the left side. So this is a mathematical problem that is solved by cult dogma, which discourages thinking. And it just says, don't think about it. When we do this, it's good. When you do this, it's bad. When we say it's good, it's good. When we say it's bad, it's bad. And so just listen to us. We are your parents. We're your government. We're just do what you are told, and we will tell you, based on what's convenient for us, what's good and what's bad at different points. And just don't get bogged down with the logic or the symmetry or the thinking of it because we said so. That's it. So you have this. And you finally have the cycle. You have this circle where you have, on the one hand, unconsciousness, which leads to dishonoring behavior. Meaning a blind person is the one who walks into the lamppost. And when the blind person walks into the lamppost, they dishonor their own body, they dishonor the lamppost. And they become highly conscious of the mistake. As soon as you bang your head on a steel object, you realize, something's going on that I didn't pay attention to. So consciousness automatically leads to unconsciousness. Unconsciousness automatically leads to consciousness. Now, pain and terror, which leads to hate, leads to wanting to hold and attach and control things. The more you hate something, the more you are in pain, the more you are frightened, the more you want to control what is. And so there's this loop between consciousness and unconsciousness, and there's this other connection between terror and control, terror and control, control and terror, terror and control. And they go hand in hand because you cannot control reality because of the law of mass. The law of mass says that the larger pattern of reality will influence the smaller pattern of reality more than the smaller pattern of reality will influence the larger pattern of reality. And by definition, I am smaller than at least half of reality. At least half of reality. We want to look at it on philosophical as a possibility field, as a neutral possibility field, then we would say, okay, half of reality is smaller than me, and half of reality is bigger than me, and I'm not aware of most of either of it. I'm aware of less than 1% of 1% of reality. The rest lies in the domain of the unknown unknown. And the unknown unknown is much bigger than me. Just how much I don't know that I don't know is bigger than what I know that I know. So in this battle with reality, where we have the control, the fight, flight, freeze out of fear in an oppositional relationship with reality, we're fighting 50% of reality, 99% of which is unconscious. We're going to lose that battle, which leads to more fear, as we experience that we cannot force the whole to change. We cannot dominate that which is bigger than ourselves. So it leads to more hate and terror, because part of hate is helplessness, and part of helplessness is this differentiation in scale. Now, in the middle of here, we have this dynamic of transcendence. We have transcendence. We have a certain freedom somewhere in the cycle of violence, somewhere in the cycle of hate, somewhere in the cycle of fight, flight, freeze, fawn, somewhere in the cycle of opposites, somewhere in the cycle of extremes, somewhere in the cycle of sympathy, antipathy, synthesis, of the in-breath and the out-breath. There is a space. There is a moment. There is a place of transcendence. There is the opportunity, as we enter any system of energy and flow through its entirety, we can get fixated and stuck at any point. I do not want to see this about me means that I cannot afford to have eyes. I cannot afford to have eyes, which means I cannot afford to see. I cannot afford to see, which means I move around in violation. I show disrespect and dishonor to what is. I cannot afford to look at this one thing means I cannot afford to have eyes that could see that one thing, which sets an entire machine in place that fixates, that contracts, that attaches to the primary drive of avoiding that one thing. It's one of the reasons that the wound or the life cycle ultimately embraces and fills our entire consciousness. Because if our primary fixation is, I will never feel this way again, I will never let so-and-so do this to me again, if that is our primary fixation, our primary center of our universe, then eventually we must dictate every single thing we think, feel, do, say, our entire identity around that negative. I don't want to feel this. I don't want to see this. And it eventually gets bigger and bigger and bigger. How can I leave my house if I absolutely don't want to see so-and-so? Well, maybe they're out there. They're certainly somewhere, and I don't know where they are, so I can't leave my house, or I can only leave it this and this, and then I can only do this and this. And what about other people that are like them? Now I can't do this, now I can't do this. And it gets bigger and bigger and bigger until we're frozen in the prism of fear, the prism of pain, the prism of attachment to a certain part of the circle. That in our attempt to dominate our own experience, we dominate our own freedom and can no longer move. As the thread gets tighter and tighter, following the linear logic of that primary foundational commitment. This is the descent into attachment. It is the descent into identity. It is the descent into culture. It is the descent into the wound. It is the descent into addiction, the descent into fixation. And it is the descent into helplessness. Because no matter how much energy we throw at that equation, we cannot dominate a reality field that is bigger than ourselves. And in our attempt to try, we are brought face to face with our own fragility, which is why it becomes an addictive, endless cycle. Where the thing that we are so committed to avoiding as a threat to our identity's survival becomes the biggest threat to our identity's survival. Because if you have to hire more and more guards, more and more machine guns, more and more traps to protect against this one phenomena, that is not being invested in an abundant future and in an abundant world, in new experiences. And so in the failure, in other words, if one is primarily rooted out of a negative, I don't want this to happen and this and this, the behavior that emerges out of that wound commitment becomes in time more dangerous to the growth cycle, to the breath cycle of, if I can never feel this, and I'm committed to not feeling it, goes out, and I can't feel it, and I'm committed to not feeling it, that becomes more dangerous than the feeling one is committed not to feeling. Similarly, every obsession, I need him, I need this, I need money, I need this, so that I can live, so that I can feel good. The obsession, where every single thing is designed to hold on to something, becomes more dangerous in its extreme than not having it at all. And so life occurs in the freedom to go up and down, rich and poor, old and young, black and white, male and female, hate and love, anger and joy, the freedom to move throughout the entire possibility field with acceptance, with grace, with understanding, with humor. And every single cycle will complete with less energy, returning us back to where we began, but knowing it more deeply. In this way, we have freedom. And we move closer to the divine consciousness that is no more attached to this than to this. That is no more fixated on the out-breath as on the in-breath. And honors the interconnectivity between ourselves and every point of the possibility field in a state of grace, in a state of benevolence. And that includes honoring every part of us that is stuck, every part of us that is filled with hate, every part of us that is attached. When we can love and accept each of those parts of us and our probability field of our past, of our future, then we identify with the God-Goddess consciousness that includes it, because the God-Goddess consciousness is the consciousness that includes each point in the circle, each point in the possibility field, with joy, with grace, with wonder, including the depression, the rage, the helplessness, the hate, welcomes it all. Rumi would call this the guest house, where every part of the self is welcome beyond the duality of good and bad, of right and wrong, where every part can come to grow, to complete the cycle